All right, thanks for being patient, Jim. Appreciate you being here. Jim Sorensen's got a lot of experience in fox hunting, both hosting and hunting, and we really appreciate you being here. Thanks, Jim.
So I've been told that I have about 10 minutes. I'll try to keep it within the boundaries. I don't want to go over your 9 o'clock. Just to try to get an idea of my audience really quick. Who in here has done TF, T hunting or fox hunting? Pretty good amount. And who has not? Okay. All right. So this presentation's got a lot of information for people that haven't and have. I'll try to go through it. If there are any questions, I'm going to have to go through it a little bit faster than I normally do, so if there are any questions, please stop me on it. Let me just give you a little bit of background about myself. My name is Jim Sorensen. I've been an amateur radio operator since I was 14. I won't tell you how long ago that was, but I've been around for a little while. I got into fox hunting probably about 25, 30 years ago because there was a lot of jamming going on at the time. We don't have that problem apparently now, but I got really frustrated with it. I was a member of the Alfred Memorial Radio Club back then, and we were pretty much being jammed, and they were doing a lot of police jamming on the repeaters and stuff like that too. So there was a group of us that got real frustrated, and we decided that we'd go out and find them, and we had no equipment, and I mean we were just terrible at it. And as a result of that, I've kind of gotten interested in doing it a little bit better than that. So I'd like to share with you a little bit about some of the basics. Kind of look at maybe some of the new stuff, and you can give me any questions in between if you'd like. All right, so I'm going to talk about these items right here. I'm going to go over the history, the application, look at some of the equipment, look at some of the advanced equipment, and okay. And I've got a little some software screenshots, but I also have some examples up here if you want to look at that afterwards. I guess while we're cleaning up. We'll kind of go over what you do during the hunt and some tips. And questions and answers through, so we can go ahead and get that out of the way. If you want to, I don't know what I'm doing. I'm kicking out, but if you got some questions, we'll answer them during the presentation. Okay. I got a lot of this stuff off the internet. This is one of the first DF loop antennas that I could find, 1919. So this basically started pretty much at the beginning of radio, mainly to help try to direct energy towards where you were trying to you're transmitting to the other receiver. So you wanted to make sure that you got most of the energy that way, and that works both ways. So kind of getting the energy to go one way, you're kind of doing direction finding. In this case, he's turning that big loop, and hopefully he's not radiating himself too bad sitting close to it. John Stone was granted the first patent with respect to DFing. So it's been around for a while, you can see. I got a kick out of this picture right here. So you got this guy standing up on top of this older vehicle right there, and that is a British post office RDF lorry from 1927. And he's finding unlicensed amateur radio transmitters back in 1927. So, I mean, that's serious right there. As some of you might know, that it became a big deal during World War I and II. It helped locate some, just one of the applications, German U-boats, to help try to find those guys. As you might know, that they were wreaking havoc on a lot of the shipping lanes. So it was really helpful to go out and find some of those boats. They come up and transmit, and hopefully they could find them and drop some bombs on them, stuff like that. How many have heard of this Wallen beaver? I've tried to pronounce it several times. You've probably seen pictures of that, right?
Is that Oxford?
I don't know where that one is. There was like 10 of those around the world or something like that. There's only one left, and apparently it's up north someplace. That it's basic, and I forgot how many antennas it had. Don't have my notes in front of me. But basically this would auto DF HF from like 2 megahertz all the way up to 15 or something like that very quickly. And they had these stationed all over the world, so the government could pretty quickly determine where a HF signal was coming from. And then they would collaborate and figure it out.
It's also known as the elephant cage.
Elephant cage, yeah, it's huge. You don't really get an idea of how big that is. That's an aerial photograph looking down on, but they're huge. So just kind of the history of it. Some of the applications. I actually work for a DoD contractor for the military, and we do a lot of electronic warfare and radio direction finding type stuff. The military needs it. They use it in battle space. You might imagine a battlefield. You want to know where the aggressors are, the people that are fighting against you, and if they're using any radio equipment, you're going to want to be able to figure out where they are very quickly. So the military uses it quite a bit, and I know you all have heard of radar, right? It's the same thing. It's basically a radio direction finding system. Okay, maritime use, navigation beacons, distressed ship location. Aircraft, I know you got some people that do flying in here. I know you've heard of the ADF, and I guess that's an older system. I know that they're using GPS and a lot of that stuff now, but the ADF, the older automatic direction finding stuff, was one way of, I guess, figuring out where you were and where you were going back in the day. I don't know, are they still active? Are they? Okay. C-130s? Okay. Downed aircraft, how many people have do anything with the Civil Air Patrol? Anybody in here do any of that? Okay, so if a plane goes down, Civil Air Patrol go out and look for it. The old emergency location transmitter, the ELTs, 121.5.
That's gone. It's 406 now.
I'm sorry?
It's 406 now.
The 121 is gone now?
Yes.
Okay. All right, well that's 121 times 2, right? Or whatever that, yeah, so they're still using it, and they use it for, you can use direction finder equipment to find that. Okay, well, how about LoJack? Anybody heard of LoJack or seen the, yeah, okay, so you see the police car. I'm surprised they're even still using that, really, to be honest with you. But you can see a police car go down the road, and it has 4 antennas on top of it. It's the LoJack. If you got your radio and you want to listen to it, it's 173.075. It sounds like FSK, they squawk all the time, but when there's somebody they're hunting, it squawks like every 200 milliseconds. It's very quick to help locate it, but they're squawking just randomly all the time. It's kind of interesting to listen to for about 5 minutes, and then that gets pretty boring. Wildlife tracking, I know you guys have seen some of the old documentaries where they're tracking, animals and stuff like that, and they tag the animal. They really appreciate that, I'm sure, but some of the original uses of radio direction finding, 1970s VHF telemetry and triangulation. And then of course we got the EPLRBs, the emergency position indication radio beacon stations, the 406.0 I believe is on that. And that's one of the you can buy that, and it'll help get you located if you get lost. All right, and again, if there are any questions, feel free to ask. All right, so let's go ahead and get started kind of in the amateur radio side of things. Has anybody seen or heard about this book right here? Okay, so this is the Bible of transmitter hunting, done by Joseph Mole and Tom Curley. It is absolutely the best one. I've got a copy. Let me go ahead and just kind of pass that around so you can get a kind of idea. It is an older book. I'm not even sure if it's still in print or not, but it is just full of all kinds of make-it-yourself type amateur radio or direction. Go ahead. Oh, did you? Somebody told me it was out of print. I bought that at HRO about 15 years ago or whatever, but it is absolutely a great book. And one of the things, you don't have to spend a lot of money on this if you want to get into it. Do it yourself. And I'm going to kind of show you some of that. Some of the stuff you can make yourself. And I did. I made a lot of, a friend of mine made a lot of stuff, and I inherited it, but I made some of my own stuff too. But it's got plans in there. It's got measurements and step-by-step instructions. It's a great book. And look, my bullet there says that it's available on Amazon's website, so it must not be out of print. All right. So, some people in here raise their hand. They've done this before, and then there's other people that haven't. I'm going to go through this section right here. Is going to be a little bit elementary with respect to direction finding. but it's basically the nuts and bolts on the beginning side. If you do want to get into a fox hunt, and we had 4 of them last year, and we had one earlier this year. It wasn't really well advertised, I don't believe. I'd like to see if we couldn't get more people involved in it, because it's kind of a dying facet of amateur radio. But it's a lot of fun. I liken it to going out with some fishing poles and fishing. You never know what you're going to catch, right? So, or hunting, And truly, it could be a lot of fun if that's something that you like to do. But I'm going to kind of go through this somewhat quickly so that we can maybe talk about some of the more advanced stuff near the end. But starting out with some of the cheaper things that you can do with respect to the hunting is with the antenna. And so we're going to look at the loop, the Yagi, and the quad. You can have the best antenna, you can have the best DF equipment in the world, but if your receiver is bad, it's not going to work for you. We're going to kind of look at that. We're going to look at attenuators, and I'll kind of go over why that's important to have that. We'll look at some sniffers and a preamplifier. Okay, so most of you in here, you've seen loops, and we kind of showed you one at the very beginning of the presentation. The way that the loop works is that the null is on the flat face part of it. So as you're turning it, you should have sharper nulls there. So basically what that means is if you've never hunted, you would turn it with your receiver. And we're going to talk about how important a receiver is, especially if you have a signal strength indicator, right? Because you don't want to listen to it. You want to be able to see the signal strength go up and down. But as you're turning the antenna, you should see some sharp nulls when the face of that is towards the transmitter, and then the more peaks as you go, what am I looking for? Perpendicular to the transmitter. One of the problems with that, though, if you can look at that, is you actually have 2 nulls and 2 peaks, right? So you have some ambiguity. You're not really sure if it's that way or if it's that way if you get a null on it. So that is one of the problems with this kind of antenna hunting device, but you can put what they call a sense on there, and that gives you kind of more of a peak on one side and a smaller lobe on the other. Or you can move some distance and do some triangulation. We'll look at that too. So the pros is it's small and lightweight, and you can make your own, and that book has a way of making one for each specific frequency you're interested in. It can be mobile. The cons, like I said, you do have an ambiguity with respect to forward or backward. You must rotate it, and there is some time that's associated with that. And it is kind of a lower gain type of antenna. All right, so I know a lot of you have worked with Yagis, and they have a very noticeable peak. So as you're turning it towards the transmitter, you're going to see a peak on your receiver, and you're going to see more of a null on the sides, and it should kind of have a lower peak on the back side of that. Here's an example of one that's used for fox hunting. Well, actually, that's not true. This is arrows, and a lot of people use them for satellite, but it's great for fox hunting too, because it's lightweight and you can swing it. It's got a handle on it, but like I said, on the front of it. So if you're turning it and the transmitter's that way, as you're looking at your receiver, you're going to see it peak as you're going towards that, and then as you swing around the other way, you should see it start dropping off. So that helps for triangulating signals that way. Like I said, this is some basic stuff, but for the folks that have never done it, you can literally either make one of these or buy one of these fairly inexpensively. This is an example of one that somebody made. I got this picture off the internet. It's a tape measure Yagi. Anybody kind of got an idea of what would be good for a tape measure Yagi? Folding up for storage, but how about rushing through brush and stuff like that if you're trying to find a fox transmitter, right? It's really virtually impossible to break this thing. So if you're kind of going through and bumping up against trees and stuff like that, it just kind of collapses and then goes right back. This thing will just be in about 5,000 pieces when you get done with it. It's a kind of an expensive one, so you wouldn't want to run through brush with that. But there are plans out on the internet for that. There's a lot of information on those kinds of antennas. Just looking at the pros real quick, it is a higher gain. That's that lobe on the front. So as you turn it towards the transmitter, you should get more of the deflection on your radio. And we're going to talk about the radio strength indicator in a minute, so just kind of hang with me on that. It's moderately easy to use and make, and it's good for low signal T-hunting. We'll talk about that in a minute too. Some of the cons though, it is a little bit bigger. You can see when I'm holding that's a 2-meter one right there, so it's kind of big. The loop is smaller, but that is bigger, but that's, it's kind of a trade-off because it has more gain. You must rotate it, and again, it takes time to DF the location with it. All right, quads. I know you guys have probably seen quads. That's a picture of one. It pretty much has the same pattern as the Yagi. Has the same pros and cons. I won't go over a lot of detail on it. It is a little bit more compact than a Yagi is for the same amount of gain and the amount of elements. Okay, so one of the points that I made about transmitter hunting, if you have really good equipment but you have a bad receiver, then it really could either make or break your hunt. The sensitivity is a big deal. The weak signal versus the noise, or your signal to noise ratio, and your selectivity. How many times have you ever been somewhere where you're trying to receive a signal and then an adjacent signal at really high power kind of wipes it out? You don't even know why, you can't hear the person anymore, but some station maybe, I don't know, on VHF, maybe 10 kilohertz off or something, just completely desenses your front end. Well, the cheaper receivers don't have very good front ends, and they don't have very good sensitivity. So this is one of those things where if you're going to spend some money and you want to get into this hobby, you can buy older equipment that's really nice and does have nicer sensitivity and selectivity, but that's where you'd want to spend your money if you're going to do it. We're going to talk about that a little bit more in just a minute. So generally the receiver cost is directly related to sensitivity and selectivity. Broadband receivers like scanners have lower sensitivity and selectivity. So if you use a scanner, they're great because you can go 220, 440 all around, but you're going to suffer in high RF areas. You're going to suffer because of that. So just keep that in mind. When I'm playing around, I've got a ICOM R100, I believe is and it's a comm receiver. It's broadband, but it has different receiver sections in it that it clicks in and out. And that's the one that I use for fox hunting. So it has 3 different sets of antennas on the back. So it is not just one antenna in. It actually has pre-selectors and different receivers. All right. I'm not going to spend a lot of time on this, but this is to bring kind of home of what I'm talking about. This is just a basic receiver. Most receivers have a front end filter. This is a bandpass filter, which means that it rejects everything on the high and the low side of that. And then you have your amplifier, you have a mixer, and then you have another bandpass filter at the IF level, and then an amplifier demodulator and that kind of circuit. The reason why I put this up here is to let you know that where the cheaper receivers skimp around is on this front end. They don't spend a lot of time on getting really low noise amplification in here, and they don't spend a lot of time, or not time, but they don't develop because of cost the bandpass filter part of it. So that's where you're suffering right there, because your selectivity and your noise is degraded. So when you get let's say the old Motorola receivers, they're going to have multiple stages in here, and they're going to have very expensive printed circuit boards at the back of the time that will give you your selectivity and your signal to noise ratio. So again, I don't want to spend a lot of time on this, but to contrast this to like a scanner, a cheap scanner, that's where they're going to really be a big difference in this front end right here. Okay, so signal strength. Receiver, you must have an RSSI, or the receiver signal strength indicator. If you have an HT, generally that's the little bars that go up there. The closer you get, the bars go farther. The farther away, the bars are smaller. How many people have bow fangs? Okay, you ever look at that? It's either on or off, right? There is no RSSI on that, so don't look at that you've got a strong signal or not, because it's actually just a energy detector at that point. It's either on or off. Some of the cheaper receivers don't have that. This is absolutely critical to help for fox hunting. If you're getting closer but you don't know it because your signal strength isn't changing, you don't have a way of knowing that, it's just one more piece of the puzzle when you're hunting, along with the bearings and plotting bearings, and we'll talk about that in a minute. Just got a real quick warning here. Some of the direction finding gear out there, if you transmit into them, so in other words, if you double up and you use your HT or your mobile radio, you got to be really careful that you don't transmit into it, and we'll show some of those. I've even seen where some of the HTs, when you turn it on, the red transmit light blinks on for a second. I don't know if that's a power supply anomaly or if it's transmitting. What I would recommend on some of those is you don't even hook it up, and you turn it on first and then hook up your DF equipment. And that's specifically if any of you have Doppler finding, Doppler direction findings, or some of the switching antenna units will do the same thing. So they can be damaged if you transmit into them. Any questions? Okay. All right. Very basic part, attenuators. So if you start getting really close to the signal, you're starting to get closer in on the hunt, you'll need something to knock the signal down. This is a commercial version of it. Basically, you have an input and an output port. You hook it up to your antenna and then the other side to your receiver, and you can actually add attenuation either through the switches or turning this dial right here. And all that does is make the receiver think that it's farther away from it. It actually reduces the signal. But if you think about it, if your signal strength meter is pegged and you're really close, you turn that on, you add maybe 20, 30, 40 dB of attenuation in it. Now it's going to start looking like a weaker signal, and you can start getting closer in on it. So that helps you as you get closer in. So some of the other antennas are good for far distance because of the gain, and then this would be something that you would want to use when you get in closer. And we'll kind of talk about how all this folds in together when we get towards the end of the presentation. All right, here's an offset attenuator. I have not used one of these until recently. It's absolutely one of the greatest little attenuators that I've seen. Most of the attenuator, and here's one right here, I'll pass it around. The great thing about this is, or the offset attenuator, is it basically takes you out of frequency. I can't even remember how far that is. It's like, is it 4 megahertz?
4 megahertz typically.
Yeah, okay. So the other one, if I go back to this one, so the bad thing about this is when you get so close to the transmitter and you're walking around trying to figure out what it is, you can actually take the coax off the antenna, off of the HT or whatever, and you're still got full strength. It's busting through the case at that point. So I don't care how much attenuation you add at that point, you really can't tell if you're getting closer or farther from it. With the offset attenuator though, you're going out of band, so it's actually, or not out of band, but you're going 4 megahertz up, and when you do that, it's no longer going through the case anymore. So then that allows you to practically walk up on top of it, and if there were like 4 cattails in a pond with an antenna in one of them, you can almost figure out which one it is. It's really a great little device. Tim Lemon actually showed me his, and that was I had to buy one after that. So Arrow makes it. There's the link there, but if you just Google it, they've got a great little. That's not theirs, by the way. That was one you can make. You can get off the internet. Okay, signal sniffers. All this is basically an antenna with a detector circuit and a little capacitor in there and a meter. But it's great. You know, I was talking about the cattail in the pond with the 3 antennas. With this thing right here, you can just turn this little dial and kind of walk up, and then when you get full deflection, you can pretty much determine which one's transmitting. But this, I mean, you have to be almost on top of it to use this. But it's a great thing for close-in hunting. This is just a picture of an amplifier. I don't know if it's low noise or not, but I just wanted to throw something up there because I couldn't find a good picture. But so if you're hunting something that's really far away and you can't really get a good signal on it, you really want to have something with a with an amplifier. That's one of the things I'm missing right now. I need to find a little low noise amplifier that I can hook in there and hook it up to like my Yagi, and because we had the last hunt we had, nobody could hear it at the start, and nobody could hear it for a long time, and I finally had to start giving hints on where it was because nobody could find it. It was probably like 10 milliwatts or something, but it was really low power. And at the starting point, nobody could hear it. But if they could have gotten something like this where they hooked up a little amplifier and gotten their Yagi out and gotten up on some high points, they might have been able to find it. All right. I guess I'm doing okay. So here's some examples of some switched direction finding. The time difference of arrival, TDOA, which is, I say lower tech, that's a misnomer, I'll talk about that. The military is actually using TDOA in a higher tech, but this is the lower tech version of it, and I'll talk to you about that in a minute, and in case anybody knows what the higher end TDOA stuff is. The little Elper, anybody heard of Elper? That's part of the Civil Air Patrol, okay? And the Doppler direction finder. We'll just look at those. So these are the switched ones. We'll talk about how they kind of are different from using antennas and things like that. All right, so this is the TDOA, time difference arrival. There are kits that you can buy. I think Ramsey has them. This one I think is in that book. If it's not, there's several versions of it. Basically, it's a coaxial feed to your HT or your receiver, and then you got some diodes in there, and you basically turn these things on at a rate. And so what happens is, as the antennas are switching back and forth, if both antennas are equal distance towards the transmitter, you get a null sound. You're not going to get a sound out of it. But as you start turning, you'll start getting a tone out of it. So it's the same problem that you've got with the loop, because you'll have ambiguity, but again, you can go off and onto maybe a mile away and get more of a bearing out of that. So there's people that know this stuff in here, because I'm getting help, I'm getting some coaching. All right, so just looking at the other ones and comparing it, you got a lower cost because you can make this. I actually made one of these. These are little 1N41. That's a 4007. That's actually kind of a big diode, but you can use little signal diodes for that. And mainly it's a construction thing for the antennas, but they've got plans in that book and they got them on the internet if you want to play with it. It actually works pretty good. You got the ambiguity though, and it does take the time like the other one. You got to get out of your car and you got to swing it and do some stuff. Because it's a switching system, it does degrade the receiver a little bit because it's switching. So receivers like to have nice antennas that just are there and not being switched on and off, and you'll have switching frequencies that'll be in there, and you'll hear that noise on the receiver. But if you're close enough or you're starting to get in the area, you should be able to hear the tone either there or not there. All right, I'm not gonna, I actually tried to, let's see, I tried to look and see if I could find a little Elper, and I could not find a picture of it. So that's where it would go if I could find the picture. It looks a lot like that, where it has some antennas like that, and it works similarly, but it is enough of a difference, and they did use it for ELTs, but as I understand it now, 121.5 is no longer there. I think they were also at the other frequency too. That was the staple DF unit for the Civil Air Patrol, as I understand it, for years. It's small. The Elper, I think, was a fixed frequency unit, and it was ambiguity. There was ambiguity there too. So these people would practice using this, and they would find the dummy ELTs, and they got actually pretty good at it. It was commercial at one time. I'm not sure if the company's still around or not. I tried to find information I could. The only reason I put it up there is because when I do these presentations, some people know about them, and it helps kind of show some of the uses for this. Does anybody not know what an ELT is? Emergency Locating Transmitter? Okay. All right, so this is a Doppler direction finder. I've got a version of it up here. What this allows you to do, there's the, remember I talked about LoJack at the very beginning, the 4 antennas? Well, this has 4 antennas. It's the same technology as the LoJack. Basically what you're doing is you're electronically switching these antennas around at about a 500 hertz rate. And as they're spinning around like that, the receiver thinks that there's an antenna actually turning around on top of your car. And as it turns around, it superimposes a Doppler shift on the audio of your FM receiver. And in case you're not exactly sure what I'm talking about, you know, if you've ever heard a train coming towards you, you know, it's kind of a higher pitch as it's coming towards you, but then as it goes by and goes away from you, it kind of goes to a lower pitch. Well, there's not that train has not changed its pitch of its whistle. It's just that perceived as it's going by you. The same thing with the antennas. The antenna rotates towards the transmitter, and away it superimposes that same Doppler shift on the radio, and you can actually hear it. They asked me if I was going to have any audio, and I actually should have embedded it in here so you could hear it. But as you have this thing operating, you can hear the 500 hertz tone, and it's very annoying. If you've ever heard 500, if anybody's ever hunting you and they're talking on another HT, you're going to hear it on their audio too, because it gets on everything. It's really quite ubiquitous inside the car. But basically what happens is you take that received audio, and because the Doppler unit knows the switching frequency and when it starts and stops, it's able to take that. You can't really see it on here, but there's 16 LEDs in this circle. So if this LED right here is on, that would indicate that it's straight ahead of you, and then of course the one behind would mean it's behind, and then vice versa with all the other LEDs. So if you're driving along and it's like going like this, you know it's 45 degrees off of your relative, if you're driving with this, it's your relative bearing from that. So that's what makes it really nice. It's continuous bearings. You don't have to get out and stop. If somebody's transmitting, you're in a hunt for fun or whatever. If they start transmitting, you'll start getting indications on here pretty quickly. It's very mobile. Is where the other ones are usually not. The cons on that though are cost. It is a little bit more, it's a lot more expensive than some of the antennas. It does degrade some of the receiver performance, and it really actually should be used as mobile, because if you sat there, stopped, and you try to use this, that bad guy called multipath is going to grab you. And as you're driving down the road and you're using this, the multipath tends to kind of start averaging out, unless it's really bad. It'll start averaging out, but as you're, and we'll talk about ways to take care of that in a minute, but if you're sitting still, you might be next to like a Walmart or something with some metal into it, and it might point to the Walmart, but it's really not the Walmart. So this really needs to be used mobile. So you can see how some of these things added together might make more of an effective hunter. Okay. Doppler Systems is still out there. They're a commercial vendor. The Pico Doppler, it's a hobby kit. This guy's been really active in some of the I think he's actually the root of the one that Tim's got. Is that the? I think it's this KN2C. Does anybody have the KN2C Doppler direction finder in here? It's one of the newer ones. You do? Yeah, I know you do. Is that it? Is that the okay? So I think that this guy used the Pico Doppler's technology on that, if I'm not mistaken. But anyway, he has the kit, and there's actually a website out there for it, and Ramsey still sells theirs, the DDF one. Okay, I know a lot of people around here probably use APRS. APRS actually had a mode for DFing. I don't know if anybody uses it. Who's the guy that wrote APRS? Bob Berniga?
Yeah.
Okay, so I actually was in talks with him about 20 years ago about adding that in there, and I got to help him do some of the integration on that software, but I never saw anybody use it. So I don't know if anybody uses it or not, and I don't know if it's even still in the software, but there are some keyboard strokes that you could do on that, and it would auto plot as you're going along. Some of the other software is this Google Hunt. I've got a kind of a screenshot of that, And believe it or not, there's these 3 apps right here that you can download. I think a couple of them are pay. The Fox Hunt Pro and the Mapping Compass, these are actually iPhone apps only. The SigTrax is both. And you can see them out there if you want to. It's all manual. You can't really get anything off of the direction finder. You just have to enter it in manually, but it looks like it's a pretty decent app. Okay, so here's a screenshot of APRS, and I don't think it has the DF. A lot of these are just tracks where they're showing the way it's going, but, oh, I'm sorry. So these are the fade circles. That was another thing that Bob added. So not only could you plot a bearing from a place, but you could add signal strength at locations, and then he had some kind of pseudo way of figuring out about where the transmitter might be from all these fade signals. It actually was pretty nice. Again, I don't know if he still has that built in there or not, if he had to rip it out. Quite honestly, I don't even know if anybody uses his version of it anymore. I know there's more of the Windows versions now. But that was actually kind of fun to play with back when we were first kind of playing around with this. Okay, Google Hunt, it's on that Pico Doppler website. Anyway, I'm sorry I don't have the links up here. I didn't think it would really help people to copy that down. But if you just remember Pico Doppler, if you're interested in that, he's the one that has this Google Hunt GPS display program. The actual link for that is right there, but if you go to the other one, they'll have a link for that. It can log up to 800 or 100 plots, manual or automatic, and it archives the data automatically. And this is kind of what it looks like. Man, if you could only get bearings that would get into a perfect little spot right there, that would be great. But that's a little bit kind of not real. But that I've actually played around with this, and so you'll have a station there, and they all give the coordinates into the software, and it plots it on Google Maps, and of course, or actually in this place, Google Earth, and then you can kind of zoom into that area, and that might be like a subdivision or something like that. So it's actually a nice piece of software if you want to play around with it. There's a user interface up here. So you can enter in lat long and then your bearing information, or if you have his Pico Doppler stuff, it'll auto plot that.
So is that 3 different receivers?
Yeah. So.
And their data going into this software?
Correct. And to be honest with you, this is off of the website, so I don't know how he collated all this data together. Probably what he did to do this is he had a station enter in, these locations here. And he got some, maybe it's this way, maybe it's this, I don't know. Actually, it's right here, isn't it? Okay, so I'm on the wrong side of that. But what you could do, and that's one of the things we'll talk about, you could get somebody that maybe doesn't want to drive around and participate in the actual hunt, but maybe wants to be a part of it, where they could get this software loaded on there, and they could get your reports from, 3 stations getting bearings from their Yagis, and then plot it out, and then you send in the hunters right in that area really quick. That's a fast way to do it versus just driving around trying to figure out where it is like we used to do. Okay. All right, I got to wrap this up. So let's talk about just kind of the phases of what you do. So let's say you're interested, you want to do this. We kind of looked at some of the equipment, some of the things you could do with it. You kind of break it down into, 4 different phases. You got your pre-hunt, you want to find the signal, then you're hunting it, and then when you're getting in close, you maybe have to go in on foot. So it's kind of like getting ready, doing the hunt, hunting, and then closing in for the kill. So we'll talk about those real quick, and maybe some strategies on that. So here's just a kind of a list of things you want to have: the appropriate receiver we talked about, your antennas, your preamp, your attenuator, your maps, your GPS, any additional advanced stuff. And you go out, and I recommend highly working with other people. Maybe have 3 or 4 people that work with you as a team, and maybe have a net operator, so somebody doesn't have to sit in a car and try to write down locations and do the triangulation. It's really great for somebody to be back at home that's got like an internet connection and can add those bearings in. But this is what the hunter would have in his car or cars. So you may remember I talked about the last fox hunt we had. People couldn't even find the signal at the very beginning. That's critical when you're starting out. If you can't hear it, you don't know where to go. So what I would recommend is, move into a high location using a low noise receiver and a preamp and a high gain antenna, and then get up there and get a bearing. And if you can get like 2 or 3 people to do that simultaneously, you go to the software that we talked about, overlap it, get your triangulation, and then start heading to that point. So finding the signal is the second stage. All right, here's kind of an example of what you do. So you have, your one guy here. Let's see. Make sure I go the right way. Okay, so you got one guy up here and one guy here. Yeah, this is the mountains, okay? This guy gets up on a little mountain peak. This guy gets on a mountain peak. They get a triangulation right there, and then you start heading that way, okay? So the reason why we're talking about the high location again is that gives you the advantage of low signals. All right, as I mentioned a couple times, altitude is king, so your height is a good, height is key to keeping good bearings. Avoid large objects like power lines, metal bridges, anything that's like steel structures and things like that, because you're going to get reflections off of that. Again, I mentioned Doppler direction find is better when you're moving. Keep track. Oh, so you want to log your signal strength as you're getting them. If you're starting to get bearings that are getting you towards a certain way, but your signal strength keeps falling, I got an example of how that can happen. That's not a good sign. So you want to keep track of your signal strengths as you're going, because just because you're heading the way your antennas and things say that you should be going isn't necessarily the way you should be going. And I'll kind of show you an example of that in a minute. Plot good bearings while you go. Again, that's great for somebody that could be up on a net, and beware of reflections. Okay, so I don't know how well you can see this. This is kind of an example of what I'm talking about. So let's say we have a black team and a red team here, and they start at the same place, and their first bearing is this way. I don't know if you can see that, but you just follow the arrow. So their first bearing is this way, right? So they start driving, they get on this road here, and they start going up here, and the black team decides that they're going to go this way, and the red team, I guess, is kind of squirrely. They're going to go this way over here because, the black team's like, we're smart, we got a bearing going this way, why are those people going that way when you got, the signal here? So this team's driving. Let's say this is like 30 miles. They're driving, and all of a sudden they get past this little ridge right here. Okay, so there's a mountain ridge right here, and there's this mountain here, and then the transmitter's right here. So the black team's going, and then all of a sudden they're going to get a swing when they get past this ridge, and there's the transmitter, and they're, 15 miles away from it. And then the squirrely red team, they kind of were playing around. They wanted to go up on this height thing and take a bearing, and sure enough, they drop a bearing and they get it right there, and then they drop down the bearing and they find it before the black team gets there. So that's what I'm saying. Height is key there. One of the things you could have done if you'd had multiple team members is maybe sent one up here to this point and then one over here and get a triangulation that way. Okay, so you can get in a lot faster. Height is one of your biggest enemies if you don't use it correctly. If you use it correctly, it'll work to your advantage. That's kind of an example of that. All right, we're getting pretty close to the end. So now you got the transmitter, and it's in this big field someplace. You don't know where in there it is. So we talked about how you're using your signal strength meter. You can remove your antenna. So if you don't have one of those attenuators, you can take the antenna off your HT. That'll only work for so far. When you start getting really close to it, it'll saturate it, and you won't be able to use it anymore. So the offset attenuator is great for that. So, I put this in here to let you know that's like a person there, and if the transmitter's over there, you could be walking all over the place. If you don't have a way of hunting in close in and you just get to the field, then you're just going to walk around for hours, and I've actually done that. So it's good. It's good to have this other equipment like the offset oscillator and the attenuator, stuff like that. We talked about teamwork. You can use simplex or any of the other electronic modes now, text. Elect a non-mobile coordinator, enlist a fixed station, and then be safe. Have a Copilot. I'm telling you, it's really, I just heard on the radio coming over here today that, and I forgot what state it is, Texas or somebody has passed this, what was it?
California's just passed a new.
Somebody, yeah, it wasn't them, but it was somebody like them. It's not DUI, driving under the influence, it's electronic DUI. And if you're caught using any kind of electronic equipment, you can get charged with it. So it's really, you know, if you have a Copilot, he can do that. So really you need a driver and a Copilot to be safe. I think that's it. Okay. So I hope I've answered. Go ahead. You know, I thought about that. That would be, he asked about drones. I thought that would be a real cool way of doing it. You know, have like 4 drones go up about 15 miles away at different things. Because you're not going to have multipath there, right? Go up and just plot something and plot it, you know, on a map. That'd be cool. That would actually give me a reason to buy a drone. I think I might do that. Yes, sir.
What's the most frequency of transmit? What frequencies? Are they all VHF, UHF, or?
For foxes?
Yeah.
Okay, so if you're going to run your own fox hunt, I think the default frequency for fox hunting is 165.65.
Okay. 140 is it a ton or is it?
146?
146.565.
Is that what I said? Did I not say? Okay.
You were out of
Yeah.
the
And
band.
is it a ton or is it a call sign? What is it?
I've got an example of here that it'll do my call sign.
Oh, okay.
Actually, so that's one thing I didn't show. I've got a Fox box up here. There are lots of examples of it on the internet. This is an ammo box. They make really good cases because they're kind of watertight and stuff like that. If any of you do Arduino programming, there's sketches out there that all you have to do is put your call sign in and hook it up to your PTT and all that, and it'll do your call sign. That's what I did, is I sold somebody's code and stuck it on there. Yeah, back there.
So, for the new people in the room,
Yes, sir?
you might explain what we're doing. Like, it's a beacon, and it transmits every so often, and that's what we're listening. Is it on FM or sideband? See,
Okay.
I'm not sure that anybody knows.
So I did a really bad job of kind of telling you why we were doing this, right?
Yeah.
So when we're doing fox hunting for play and fun, typically it's on the 2-meter band, and we'll have a transmitter that's transmitting FM, and it'll be 146.565, and that's what this one is right here. And somebody will go out and hide it. This one right here has got a way of locking it to a tree, and you can just throw a bunch of brush on it and run like an antenna up in the branches. And you just call back to the people at the beginning. You know, you have like, so typically what it would do is you'd have everybody meet at like a Walmart or something like that, and at a certain time they say the transmitter's going, go out and find it, and they give you the frequency, and everybody kind of works as teams and things like that. So I apologize for not telling you. That's the kind of the fun way to do it. Now there are people that, you know, one of the things that I've helped do with this equipment is I've helped find stuck microphones. You know, somebody lays an HT in the seat and it tips over and something falls on it and it locks up a repeater for half an hour. I've been able to use this Doppler stuff to do that. So you can use it for fun stuff or for practical. Yes, sir?
You've also got, as part of the Volunteer Observer Program, folks that use radio direction finding for purposes of looking for violators, and they're particularly having problems right now with a 60-meter net, where folks are coming in and they're not staying on creek is what it boils down to. So they're trying to get volunteer observers to go out and start looking for those violators, and they have started looking at levying fines.
You said 60 meter?
Doing this from memory, but yeah.
Okay. Okay. Yeah, I mean, so I have a little bit of experience with the FCC because I've actually been a contractor to work for them. So they had a station over at Powder Springs. I think somebody was here from Powder Springs, right? I really think that's all been completely dismantled. I've been over there and a lot of that equipment's gone. We're doing some mobile direction finding stuff. I don't know how much they're enforcing that, because I've heard some stuff where it doesn't sound like they're enforcing anything, to be honest with you. But at one time our FCC was really on the ball and would do that kind of stuff.
It is 60 meter and it's up on our website right now, if I remember correctly.
Okay. So there are some practical uses for it, but you know, I like to do it. It's one of the, you know, you have a lot of these other events that you guys run. That's the kind of stuff I like to do. So it'd be really nice to get a large group of people that are interested and have maybe 2 to 3 hunts a year, it just seems hard to keep the enthusiasm there, but maybe we'll keep, yes, sir.
Well, real quickly, otherwise, you don't have to do it in the middle of a farm field. A lot of times we've done fox hunts in urban areas, which makes it even a little more challenging with reflective.
Oh, yeah, definitely.
One of the things we did last year was down in Sandy Springs. And amongst the buildings and the stuff, and that's really kind of fun because you get so many multipaths, you have to get out and really try to get away from the stuff, find it.
And just as a real quick note, if you're at the Lawrenceville Ham Fest and want to try, they do it there, I think every year, there's a bunch of kids running around.
Right, yeah, I watch them. It's fun to watch them run around and do that.
It is fun. It's also fun to transmit on that frequency.
I'm sure that never happens. All right. Yes, sir.
When's our next fox hunt?
Anytime anybody wants to do it. I can't do it the first 2 weeks in August because I'm going to be up in Alaska, but anybody who wants to put one on, I'll be happy to do it there. Yeah, come look for it there.
What he's messing with up there, you won't do.
Okay. All right, well, hey, I've enjoyed. I thank you for having me, and I hope I answered some questions on it, on the subject.